Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to War in Heaven Unpacked. I'm Giselle Shultz. I'm the director for this play, and I'm along here with my good friends.
I'm Jared Anderson.
I'm Mike Stratte.
Yeah. So we're going to dive right into the next couple scenes of this play. The first one is kind of the nativity scene that we're used to seeing. We see Mary and Joseph. It's so lovely. We get to see the wise men. We get to see the shepherds. And there's this beautiful scene of Mary holding the baby Jesus. And then all of a sudden, like the music changes a little bit. And we have Satan on the scene. I've had so many people tell me that this is one of the hardest scenes for them to watch.
You're putting Satan into my nativity scene?
Yes.
He's been missing this whole time.
Well, I've had so many moms tell me that just this was a hard scene for them to watch because we know he was there. We know that he was watching all these events unfold, and we have this beautiful scene, the stars, the angels, all this other stuff, and then Satan is there what is this? This thing, I've been waiting since I got hurled down to this earth, and now there's this baby in my world. And we just kind of see him kind of processing this confusion as to this weakling compared to where we see these cosmic events. We talked about the war in heaven happening, these titans in the sky. And then all of a sudden now we're in this simple manger and a little helpless tiny baby. I mean, it's when you think about it, you think also about the angels at that time, they're wait, I was walking on the streets of gold with him a year ago, and now this infant is the creator God of the universe, and just trying to, like I said, none of these scenes do any of this justice in real life, but trying to just portray that where this falls into that plan.
Man, so much could be said about God becoming a human. And he didn't, like you say, he didn't just become one of the strongest, burliest guys riding in on a white horse. He's going to do that someday kind of thing, right? But when he came as Jesus, it was this tiny, weak little baby. And it made me think about this war in heaven and how God is on trial kind of thing. And God is trying to woo us. He's not trying to, what's the other word? He's trying to woo us.
Dominating.
Yeah.
Not forcing.
Yeah.
You must love me.
Right.
Yeah. You're going to love me.
I'm thinking of dogs herding sheep, that's a forced action. No, he's trying to draw us and woo us. And what is more drawing and wooing than a tiny little baby? I think you, out of the three of us, have the newest little one.
2 months.
The most recent.
Yeah.
And when you first come to church with your tiny little one, right? It's oh,
They weigh
let
nothing.
me see.
Yeah.
So it just adds to that case for God of he wants to draw us. He wants to woo us and show us his beauty and his goodness in the best way possible, which, as we see, is to become a little baby.
Something you mentioned earlier where you said God, this fictitious people that we're talking to 10,000 years from now, right? And they're well, what about this? And what about that? And God went through every single second, birth, life, and death. Mm-hmm. And we were laughing a little earlier when we were talking about this, the toddler, I want the blue cup. I want this. I don't know what he was like as a toddler or a kid. And we go into that scene next, right? Where he's being raised by Mary, but he experienced it all.
Yeah.
Every second.
Yeah. Total human, right? Total God, total human. He experienced everything that we experienced.
He didn't get to skip puberty. He didn't get to skip school. None of it. He lived every second that we have.
Did he have the acne that I went through when I was?
I do not know. We are not told about this acne.
Pretty short.
But yeah, so the verses that we have down, like each one of the Gospels touches on this, Mary and Joseph, their lineage, it talks about it. And then it talks about why they ended up in Bethlehem. And like, as a mom, I know that you guys have experienced your wife's giving birth, but as like a mom giving birth, I cannot imagine having my kid in a barn. And I know a lot of people do, so like, or around the world. So no shame in that. Like, that's amazing. But just like the most humblest of beginnings, the most tiniest of no riches, no fanfare, no Instagram posts. Like, it was just so calm and precious. And I don't know, I love delving into some of those stories now that I've experienced life, and what were they thinking? What were they going through during that time?
This reminds me of Bible talks about how God's ways are higher than our ways. And when I think about like, okay, we're going to go save the world, we got to get an army, we're going to have force, and that's what his disciples thought as well. His disciples thought, okay, any day now, Jesus, you can go ahead and lead that military uprising against the Romans, free our nation. And that's kind of what everyone was expecting. And that's the expectation maybe even Satan had. And it kind of speaks to the confusion in that scene of like, wait, what is this baby here? He's so weak. It's going to be easier than I thought, right? He has that pride. But I think this is just an eye-opening example of God's ways being higher than our ways. And it leaves Satan speechless in this scene.
So many times I think this also speaks to what we call prophecy or things like that. So many times we think that we have it all figured out, or we know how God's going to show up or show himself. And I think his even origin story shows us that like it's always going to be a little different than what we think.
Yeah, it seems like prophecy oftentimes is best served or it's best understood in hindsight because talk about Bethlehem, like that was prophesied, right? And the genealogies because there's this verse here talking about like the throne of David, God will give him the throne of David type thing. So anyway, like Jesus was descended from the line of David. And I believe if you look, was it Matthew's genealogy that shows, he like actually lists out a whole genealogy saying like, look, Jews, it actually happened. And I think it's like, I don't remember what it is. It's like, it has some sort of numerical pattern, like 14 generations, 14 generations, 14 generations, Jesus. It's something like that.
Yeah.
I should have prepared. But a lot of them didn't necessarily get it. Maybe some of them did, like when they, brought baby Jesus to the temple, right? And who was the person that was there that was like, oh, I've seen the Lord now. Yeah. And I can die in peace now. Like maybe he got it. But yeah, you bring up prophecy and it makes me think about how now we look back on those and we're like, oh, yeah, that was totally fulfillment. But for the ones that are maybe yet to be fulfilled, it's like, well, God might shock you and do it in a much different way than you thought you had it figured out. Because who would have thought when Jesus was going to come to earth and execute this plan, who of the angels, who even Lucifer, who would have thought that it would have been...
It would have played out, yeah.
Like the easiest, tiniest little mishap, and that life could have been snuffed out real easy.
Well, I think you were mentioning this lineage, this 14 generations or whatever it ends up being.
I better Google that. Maybe it's 12.
But I just think it's super interesting how God just had this amazing thread that just flowed through everything to end up in the life of Jesus. And like we look back on it now and are like, oh yeah, we see it. Totally makes sense. But then like Jesus ended up in Bethlehem where David had been. And, I just think about Mary talking these prophecies through with Jesus and him starting to see himself somewhere in there, right?
So describe to us, so there's the scene of the nativity and whatnot, but then there's the next scene is titled what? And he grew?
And he grew.
So, yeah.
So this scene is kind of, I got the idea for this from the Bible verse, and he grew in stature and favor with God and man. And it's this kind of scene where we kind of see Jesus with the nativity, Mary with a young baby, and then Mary with a little bit older kid where they're playing, they're interacting. She's showing him, like we do, all our toddlers, the little nature things like that. And then she leaves, and the next scene is Jesus even a little bit older, and she's reading to him through the prophecies. We know that, we have to know that she did some education, right, of Jesus. She spent every day with him, in whether he was in the carpenter shop or whether he was in the home. Think of I can't think of the countless loads of laundry and countless meals that I go through with my kids, and they're only like 6 years old, right? So you just think of these really mundane things that she was doing and educating him and preparing him. And then the last scene is Jesus, the older Jesus in the play, Kevin, who plays Jesus, comes out and has this interaction with his mom and then leaves on his ministry. And her job is kind of done, right? He's now ready to launch into the world, as we do with all of our kids, right? When they leave off for college or for their first jobs or whatever. And so I just wanted to bridge that scene as to so much happened during that time that we don't know about, right? But we know it was mundane and it was miraculous, like all of our kids' lives are, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to think about. How much of a kid was Jesus? Did he? I don't know. He was sinless, right? But did he still kind of make mistakes that he needed to learn from? And I don't think he was endowed with all knowledge and wisdom. I think he studied and all that. And so it's an interesting question of when did he know that he's Jesus? Those are kind of fun things to think about. But bringing it back to the lens of the war in heaven, it is an interesting idea to think Lucifer was there too at the nativity and scheming his way. In fact, we know, think about Herod, come back and tell me where he's at so I can go and worship him, or going and killing all of the little ones,
Was Jesus aware of his birth story and some of those conflicts going around him? I'm sure his parents shared that with him. Why were they living in Egypt, right? He might have had some of those questions. And I just wonder, what did Jesus think at some point in time when we go into adolescence, we start thinking about what we want out of life or what God wants of us, or, things. And what did Jesus think he needed to do to prepare for then that launch into ministry?
Well, it's interesting too, because just thinking about that, 30 years of age at that time was well into adulthood. People were getting married very young ages, and that was at least middle age. If not you're pushing it a little there, buddy. You still single? Still single there, Jesus? What are you doing?
I've never thought of that.
I'm just thinking about what were his 20s like. And talking about preparation and things. It's just really interesting to think about.
I used to take comfort before I was 30, and in my teenage years or in my 20s or even 30, 31, whatever, I used to take comfort in the idea that, what have I really done with my life? Well, Jesus didn't really do a whole lot until he was 33 or whatever. But now I'm beyond that, so now I have no excuse. But I never thought about how, the lifespan back then, and man, he was kind of getting older kind of thing. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the Bible really just goes pretty much from, the birth of the Messiah.
Yeah.
They lived in Egypt. He's 30, he's ready to launch his ministry, type thing. And so much happened during that time. And so I just wonder, in the whole cosmic scheme of things, this war in heaven, how he was preparing to know, now it's time to prepare my ministry, and let's go. God, let's do this. I'm ready to tell people of your love and to tell a different story, which we go into in the rest of the play. So
great.
Yeah.
Well, shall we see what comes next?
For sure.